Hey guys, easily a top 5 question that gets asked on the Parks on the Air Facebook group is about logging. What do I have to log for Parks on the Air? If you're an activator, how do you handle your logs out in the field? How do you get the ADIF exports to send in to the regional coordinators? And so what I wanted to do today, since it's craptacular outside, blowing snow and sleet and 10 degrees, is run you through my N3FJP amateur contact log setup. There are lots of ways to do this, lots of programs that handle it. This one is not free and doesn't come out of the box ready to do POTA. But in my experience, once you get it set up, it works pretty reliably and pretty easily. So what I got here is a brand new install of ACLog. I'm going to spare you here's how you download it and run setup, because all of that stuff is pretty boring. There are 1 or 2 screens that it will run you through on first run to put in your call sign and your lat long, stuff like that. But once you get into it, this is the screen you're going to be faced with. Now, by default, ACLog is set up for general ham logging. It's not oriented to any specific contest or anything like that. To make it work really well for POTA, there are 2 things that we need to change. The first thing is in the back-end database. So we're going to come in here and go down to other field titles and fill behavior. Now what this is going to give me access to is 8 fields in the database that exist to hold whatever you want them to hold. But they're called other 1, other 2, other 3. They have these very nondescript names, which frankly are not even ADIF compliant when you export it. For POTA, we need to rename 2 of these fields. Specifically, we're going to call the first one SIG Info, and SIG stands for Special Interest Group. It's part of the ADIF specification. And in our case, the Special Interest Group information for your QSO is the park number for the person on the other end of the RF. So if you're sitting at home chasing, it's the activator in the park. If you're activating, that's only going to get filled in for a park to park. In other words, the other guy's got a park number. The second one that we need is my SIG info, which is only going to be useful if you're an activator, because your SIG info, your park number, well, you only have one if you're sitting in a park. That's all you absolutely have to do in here, but this is also where the settings are for how does ACLog handle auto-population of these fields. This SIG info, the other guy's park number, you probably don't want to auto-populate, because the odds that you're going to have the same park number 2 QSOs in a row, only if you're talking to one of those activator teams and you get 2 or 3 calls from the same park, but it's pretty rare, not worth auto-filling that. Your park number, however, is pretty constant. It's either blank if you're sitting at home chasing, or as long as you're at the same park, it's the same value. So I take the second record here and change that from none to previous record, meaning when I create a new entry in here, take whatever value I had from my last QSO and put that same value in here. That's all we need in terms of database editing, so go ahead and click Done. Now you can see already in the GUI down here, middle of the bottom, this box now says SIG Info. The GUI field for entering a value for the other number 1 database field was already on the screen when we started this thing. Since we renamed it, it's got a new name in the GUI. It would be great if they could have aliases, so that could be called SIG Info in the ADIF and park number on the GUI, but no support for that, so you're just going to have to remember that SIG info is the other guy's park number. Now that the database is the way we want it, let's come up here and start editing the GUI to make the QSO entry form more streamlined, more tailored, if you will, to Parks on the Air, specifically to a park activation. That's also on the settings menu. We're going to go down to Edit Fields, Displayed, Position, and Tab Order. And 99 times out of 100, ACLog is going to complain and say, before you can customize the form, we've got to put it back to its kind of default state. So do you want to do this? You don't really have a choice. You're going to have to say yes, and then you're going to have to restart ACLog in order to get it to work. The important thing is that after the restart, just let ACLog come up however it wants. Don't maximize it, change the size of the window, move it around on the screen. It's got to be in its default configuration before you can change anything. So your very first move is to go back to settings and edit fields displayed position tab order, which this time should bring up the tab order dialog. Okay, there's a couple of steps we want to take in this box, and we may have to come back to it more than once. But the first trip sort of down the list, we want to evaluate the things that are being shown to you on the form and decide whether you actually need them displayed at all or not. So for instance, as I scroll down the list here, we come down to time off. I don't generally log time off the QSO for Parks on the Air. The QSOs are real short as a rule, and so there's no point in logging the time off. It's almost the same as the time on. If you don't want to have to deal with a field on your display, you pick it from the list on the left, and then you come down here and uncheck this box where it says Visible on Main Form. If you notice all the way down there in the bottom right of the screen, when I uncheck the box, the time off entry field disappears from the GUI. Slide the box over. Likewise, QSL sent and QSL received, I don't track that at all in any of my logging programs. I certainly don't want it on the screen for POTA. Down here under time, it has it in both local and UTC time. I'm going to disable the local time and just keep UTC. And then as we mentioned earlier, the SIG info, the other field number 1, is already displayed on the GUI, and it shows up right here in the list. There's other. If I toggle that off, the SIG info disappears. But we also want the My SIG info field, which was other number 2. So I'm going to come all the way down here to near the bottom of this list, find other number 2, and turn on Visible on Main Form. If I scoot this over a little bit, you'll see it just appeared in the middle of space over there. We'll fix that in a minute. But once you have the right stuff on the screen and the stuff you don't need hidden, you want to check this box here, Enable Repositioning of the Fields. This is what's going to let us clean up the GUI and put it in a nice order. So check that and then check Done. And now's when the fun begins. Now you get to rearrange all of these blocks into whatever you think makes sense for how you enter QSOs. I'm going to speed through that, show you how I set mine up. There's no magic to this. It is literally just grab a field and drag it and drop it wherever you want. I wish ACLog had some functions to line stuff up for you. It doesn't. It's going to take a minute to get it right, especially if you have OCD like I do, but just power through it. You only have to do it once. And oh, by the way, you're going to get a lot of these naggy pop-up boxes that say, hey, you have to put something in that field in order to log a contact. Just click OK and go on with your day. It doesn't mean anything at this point. Okay, I've got everything where I want it, and in the process I realized that I have a field displayed that I don't actually want on the GUI. I'm glad that ACLog tracks counties, but I'm not going to be logging county manually during a POTA activation, and I certainly don't have any need to look at it. So, with everything else mostly situated, I'm going to come back up here to Settings, Edit Fields Displayed, Position and Tab Order, and I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to come down and find County, wherever the heck it is, and I'm going to turn that off. And I'm also going to uncheck the box that says Enable Repositioning, because I don't want this stuff moving around now that I have it where I want it to be. And the last thing to do is to look at the fields and where they are and imagine the order in which you want to enter these things. Odds are you put the boxes in that order. Now what you want to do is drag them around in this table so that as you hit the tab key and it moves from field to field to field, that it follows the progression of how you wanted to enter the information. Now, call sign is always at the top of the list. I kind of wish they would put it in there and just make it so you can't move it, but you have to just know call is always on the list. You can't turn it off, and it's always at the top of the tab order. So you're going to start in the call box no matter what you do. Now, in a POTA activation, usually what happens is you'll call CQ or QRZ, you'll get a couple of calls back, you'll pick one out, you'll call them, and you'll give them their signal report. So after you type in the call sign, the sent signal report is the next thing you want to enter. So I'm going to find that in the list and just click the up button until it goes up to the top. The person you called will hopefully hear you and respond with your signal report. So that'll be the next place we want the tab to take us. All right, some of you are working ahead and have already come down and found the log contact, thinking, oh, I'm going to move that up because normally after I get my signal report, that's what I want to do. Well, here's the funny thing. You can log the contact at any time just by hitting the enter or return key, whatever suits you. You don't actually have to worry about where log contact is in the tab order because it's not an entry field. It's just a button, and you won't tab to it anyway. In fact, if you move that up under received and try it, tab through it, you'll see that the cursor skips right over the button anyway. It won't stop there, so it doesn't matter where you put it. Having said that, I'll go ahead and move it up in the list because it is likely the next thing you're going to do. The next actual field that we want to tab to is the SIG info, which is the other entry in the tab list corresponding to that database field. I'm going to move it up underneath log contact. Again, doesn't really matter. Log contact is a button, not a tab stop, so this is just going to go in order the way things are on the form. Okay, so from here, now I'm just putting the rest of these fields in the order that they're in actually on the UI because there's some fields you might edit, most of them you won't, especially if you have a connection to your radio so that ACLog can gather the frequency, band, and mode information auto-magically. The odds of you typing any of this stuff in are pretty low. However, I just like to have it in order because you get confused, or at least I do, if you start tabbing and the cursor's jumping all over the place. Of course, as soon as I say that, I get down here to the comments field and it's dawning on me that's probably the next most likely one that I would want to type something into. So even though it's a little disjointed and would have the cursor dancing around, I'm going to go ahead and move that up underneath other, aka the other park number. There is a chance that after I put in the sent, received, signal reports, park number, if it's a park to park, I might want to make a comment about this QSO, like send a QSL card or something along those lines, or it was the other guy's birthday, or who knows. It doesn't come up very often, but it's certainly more likely than that I'm going to correct the name or state or something like that. So I'll bump it up the list. Anyway, once the list is in whatever order you think makes sense for tabbing around and entering QSOs, you're going to hit the Done button, and largely your UI and database fields are set up to be ready for POTA. One other thing I'm going to strongly suggest if you're an activator is that you come up here to the call book menu. This is where you configure ACLog to do lookups. As you type call signs into the call field, it will in the background go to ham call or QRZ, whatever you have configured in here to do a lookup and bring back grid square and county and state and address and all that fun, happy stuff and populate it in your log entry. Well, problem is that lots of times when you get out to the park, you don't have internet service. There's no Wi-Fi for sure, and your cell phone service may or may not be good. You may or may not have hotspot as an option on your cell plan, whatever. Lots of reasons why the computer running ACLog might not be online or would be online with such a slow connection that live lookups would be painful at best. That's why this right here, ACLog call data, exists. This is a downloadable database of call signs that lives right on the computer where you're doing the logging so that no internet connection is required to do lookups while you're logging. I would strongly suggest if you're going to activate, turn this on. Come in here, hit the download data button. You need to do that once a quarter, once every 4 or 5 months, something like that, to keep it up to date. But at least do it once, and then once the download is done, click this Enable Call Data Lookup button. Alrighty, and with that enabled, and just for nothing up my sleeve, none of the other ones are enabled, if I come down here to the call box, and let's just say I was lucky enough to score a QSO with myself, you'll notice that as soon as I tab off of the call field, two things happen. One, my contact information is looked up and placed into the respective fields here. This is a new contact because it's the only contact in this database. And the sent and received signal reports are pre-populated with the previous values. You can turn that off if you want. But more importantly, I'm sitting on the sent signal report box. Now, it doesn't know what mode I'm in because I'm not connected to the radio. So let's erase that by hitting the escape key and come down here and let's do this the way we would really do this. Let's say, okay, I'm on 20 meters. I'm on 14.250 is my frequency. I'm in single sideband for my mode. I'm running 100 watts and I'm at the local park here, Kilo 1387. So now I start calling CQ, and I get this goofball again. He contacts me. I hit tab. Now you'll see the sent signal report is appropriate for a sideband conversation because it knows what mode we're in. I can say, oh, yeah, of course, N3FJP, he's always 5'9", but he's not a real nice guy. He only gave me a 5'3" back. As soon as I tab off of the 5'3" received signal report, I go to the SIG info box, even though log contact was my next tab stop, because there's no way to put the cursor on a button. So at this point, all I have to do is hit enter, and I have logged that contact. I'm also back in the call box. I'm ready for the next one. Well, let's say the next one is something interesting. I actually talked to this guy earlier this morning, S51DX. He's a big gun station. He's on all the time over in Slovenia. Well, when I hit that and tab in, you'll notice that all the rest of the stuff, the band, frequency, mode, power, and the park that I'm sitting at is all populated from the previous contact. Makes perfect sense. Odds are I haven't changed frequency or moved parks between QSOs. But none of the rest of the stuff, the name, the comments, none of that filled in because there aren't Slovenian calls in the offline database. No matter, I'm going to send our Slovenian friend a 5'9", and he's going to say 5'9" to me, all of which is a lie, and we're going to hit enter and log that contact as well. So now I get home and I have my log with contacts in it, and it was a good day for DX. So now I've got some calls that don't have all the information they could have in them. Not to fear. You can, once you get back to connectivity, come up here to the call book menu and turn on additional lookup mechanisms. So I've pre-configured in here QRZ lookup. I'm going to enable that, but turn off the image and bio page stuff. Now with QRZ enabled, I can pick this contact or maybe a bunch of contacts, come up here to the edit menu and say fill fields determined by call. I'll do it for just the selected record. You'll get a little warning message that says, hey, if you're going to do this for a whole bunch of calls, the QRZ system may complain that you're hammering them and start throwing errors. It also says, by the way, this is irrevocable. If you go look up some data and it's completely bogus, too bad. There ain't no undo on this. So make sure you want to do it before you do it. But I'm going to hit yes, hit OK. And sure enough, now, if we go back and we look at this QSO, I'll open it up in the edit box. The details that I didn't have in my local database have been populated. I now have a grid square and I have a name and, as it turns out, an address. So I really don't think that you're losing much, frankly, by using this program in a disconnected mode. Yeah, it's nice to have the first names so you can respond to people, but if your push comes to shove and you just don't have the connectivity, at least ACLog gives you something with the option to go back and get the rest of it later. All right, just to look at one last thing. This is the log from my last park activation back on the 11th. It was a good day. I got 75 contacts in, well, let's see, from 17:25, I started at 16:39, so less than an hour. Not too shabby, which is good because the wind was blowing like mad that day too. Anyhow, this is the log for my activation, and I'm ready to do two things. I want to send it to Parks on the Air so it can go into the system. So what I'm going to do is come down here and say export ADIF, the whole log in this case. We'll get to that in a second. The beauty of this is because of the way we set up the database with the SIGinfo and MySIGinfo fields and the auto population, even just from the local database of stuff, this log is ready to go. It requires nothing more than exporting and sending to make it 100% compatible with the POTA system. So I give my log a name, which is my call sign, the park I was at, and the date of my activation. Hit save. It's going to ask me if I want to fudge this a little bit, change phone to SSB or make some other changes. None of this is necessary. You just hit the continue button and there you go. One log file in ADI format ready for emailing to the Parks on the Air folks. The other thing I'm going to do with that ADI file is import it into my master log. Just a tip and trick for you activators out there. I do not sit down with my whole log database to log for an activation. In fact, what I do when I start at a new park, I come in here to File New and start a new log with a new database at a new location. And again, typically, I will set that up with the same name, only in this case, it'll be an MDB Microsoft database file. And that way, it doesn't really matter how badly I bugger up this log. The worst case scenario is that I really screw it up and it's unrecoverable and the contacts don't make it into the system, which would be bad, but at least it didn't mess up my whole master log. Okay, as I said at the beginning, not intended to be an end-to-end tutorial of ACLog. I just wanted to cover the POTA-specific stuff with a real focus on if you're an activator, here's what you might do. Questions or comments, leave them down below here or come find me in the Parks on the Air Facebook group. Hopefully the weather will improve and we can take this little medicine show back out on the road. But if not, we'll find something to do around here. We got amps to build, drill presses to organize, devices to put on the workbench, no shortage of stuff to do. So stick around YouTube and definitely in the meantime, stay safe.